This experiment has been described by scientists around the world as fantastic in their insolence and complexity. Two Soviet interplanetary stations, Vega 1 and We, had developed two unique sets of instruments for which interspace experts and scientists from Austria researched over 1 billion kilometers, entered the dense field shell of the Galley comet. Each of whose dust at such a speed had armor-piercing forces, and sensitive instrument sensors transmitted data on star matter. The station camera showed us the core for the first time. Sky pages. Perhaps humankind has not moved as fast in any direction of its development as space has achieved such great achievements in such a short time. The many videos, films, and photographs have saved us the most vivid events of the beginning of the space age. And every year, more and more of these events were connected to the Interspace program, which contained a lot of star roads. It's like a fan to me. These are primarily manned space flights. For today, I think it's just the first steps. Combining effort, science, international cooperation in the exploration of outer space for the benefit of all the people of the Earth, for the sake of peace and economic management on our planet. The cosmonauts of all the countries of the Bulgarian, Hungarian, Vietnamese, Arcube, Mongolia, Poland, Romania, Shrub and Czechoslovakia program represented their peoples in space orbits with dignity. But space was a difficult and dangerous field of human activity and was not only about time. On the flight of the Soviet-Bulgarian crew Nikolai Rukavishnikov, Georgia Ivanova refused the propulsion required when docking and returning from orbit, the last frontier before the seemingly inevitable tragic outcome. The professionalism and courage of the astronauts have become the questions that Commonwealth members have sought to answer have always been of the greatest concern to science. More than 150 valuable experiments were conducted only in manned flights, and how many of the most interesting data about countless secrets of space have the faithful helpers of man brought in the machine. The Interspace program was adopted in the 1967th year. It is unlikely that any of the leading scholars who signed it would have fully represented the number of days and holidays ahead of her. But there's gonna be holidays. The first satellite series of the Litecoin program, which was in October of the 1969th year, Interspace 1 satellite opened. It was launched in order to study the Solar-Earth bond. Experiments on the physical processes taking place in the Sun then continued with satellite projections that were made for high apogee orbit. All life on Earth is inextricably linked to the Sun. Solar disasters cause extreme weather changes on the planet, disrupt radio communications, and adversely affect human condition. Especially the sick have an impact on the growth of plants, and thus on the harvest. Polish scientists, together with the Soviets, have developed scientific equipment, Interspace Copernicus 500, named after the 503 since the birth of the Great Residual. The satellite helped to get new data on the solar flare mechanism. In commemoration of the 1300th anniversary of Bulgarian statehood, the Space Bulgaria filter satellite was launched. He continued his research on the ionosphere and magnetosphere of the Earth. His equipment was designed and manufactured in Bulgaria. Each country YAPO's participation in space research has contributed to the active development of science, and industry. At the same time as satellite research, outer space was explored with vertical missiles. These missiles allow astrophysics equipment to be removed from the Earth YAPO's atmosphere and returned to the Earth YAPO's atmosphere immediately on parachute while exploring all layers of the Earth YAPO's atmosphere. Space meteorology has always been a major part of the program. It was launched by meteorological missiles along with orbital space weather stations. They make it possible to understand the whole weather mechanism, and the planet's education is not comparable in predicting weather conditions. The future of our planet is covered by the ocean, and, of course, there are no weather stations. The satellites make it possible to make up for this deficiency precisely by observing our entire globe. They observe both the populated areas of the Europa and the American regions of the north and the small mountainous areas. You are not. They see the weather in these areas in the same way. In order to process this information, our country YAPO's and GDR YAPO's experts have developed an original set of technical tools that have accelerated the production of short-term weather forecasts dozens of times. The new one rarely goes without conjecture or doubt. For example, some are just convinced that rocket and satellite launches have ruined the weather, and information about devastating hurricanes, floods somewhere in other parts of the world or on our side now. With the development of these means, the information becomes available to everyone, so it seems that the phenomenon of such dangerous, destructive, meteorological phenomena has increased, but it's not. We just know more about them. It's not only a formidable phenomenon, it's also quite beautiful. That's why there's an idea, but let's go with women's names. But lately, women have spoken out against porn. The World Meteorological Organization has decided to call typhoons male names as well. Such forecasts are needed by professionals in various professions. We're preparing prognosis material for aviation, in particular, to provide aircraft on high-altitude missions to the upper troposphere at a height of 6 to 10 kilometers. And we need a specific projection. Yes. Satellites have become fundamentally new, high quality and reliable. Communication is now difficult to imagine without such a link. Political, economic and cultural relations between countries. There are no unaffordable places for her, no distances on Earth. Telemists and phone calls across the oceans are common today. But it took years and years of hard work for Soviet specialists and a constant search for many groups of pan-European countries. The International Intersputnik Organization was established to exchange radio and television, satellite telephone and telegraph programs. The contradictions and diversity of our world are even greater. It's even clearer how fragile and vulnerable he is and how to protect him. Right. Here in the country's main library, ancient manuscripts and foliants include rare old maps written with the hands of pioneers. Many of these cards pay for their lives. But not everyone on Earth saw our ancestors the way they did. Cosmonautics finished centuries of cartographers' work. Kind of like them. The multinational cameras developed by GDR and the Soviet Union were among the unique instruments for Earth exploration. The camera operates in the dice of the spectrum, has a high resolution. Space imagery improves the efficiency of mineral prospecting, helps to investigate the state of the land, determine the time of planting and harvesting of crops, identify the pockets of forest disease, the arrival of deserts, and find the underground seas. It's an amazing rate of space shooting. But getting a huge amount of information, sometimes in subtle signs, hasn't even half worked. You need to be able to hide the puzzles once in a while. The pilot flights continued to explore the ever-ending possibilities of space technology. Isn't it behind these alloys that can only be produced in space that the future industry in weightlessness allows to grow theoretically any size crystals necessary for superb instruments? Already, it seems to be a very real organization in the space of industrial production. Special interest. It leads to the conclusion that harmful industries have an atmosphere. Isn't that the fundamental solution to the Earth's most pressing environmental problems? To whom the sapiens are reasonable. He is not always reasonable in his dealings with the world around him. And our planet is increasingly calling for help. The environmental danger is the second threat to the very existence of mankind after the nuclear war. Earth surface studies, conducted simultaneously at 3 levels in space, on aircraft, helicopters and directly on the ground, are of particular practical value in studying pain spots. One of these pain spots is the Fishwater Reservoir. An international aerospace experiment was conducted here with 87 inland water bodies. Questions had to be answered as to the extent to which the catchment area was large. Which substances were transported from the water abstraction, such as the characteristics of the management of the reservoir, as affected by the coastal zone. And especially visible are these experiments, the great indissoluble connection of everything on Earth. A connection that we so often and so irresistibly violate. Quality, before ever space really gives us the mountains of bread and the abyss of power, as Tsiolkovsky had foretold. In the meantime, it helps preserve the fact that, over the years of practical space activities, we have received answers to many questions about the impact on the living body of the cosmic weightlessness of radiation, that is, penetrating particles. But the horizon is running away all the time and new, even more complex questions are emerging. What, for example, would happen to a man who would spend not days in space, not months, but years? And as always, in such cases, our smaller brothers come to our aid. Because even in the most perfect spaceship, a man can live years without a bush. From the grass next door, After all, these are the precious features of the home planet and a part of the food supply. There are still a lot more questions here than answers. Most plants bloom and die. Why chop them up? How do you help them survive? Give them a crop. In the meantime, the cosmonauts' daily diet, balanced across all components, looks like this. Its development for international flights involved nutrition institutions in many countries.
Should we say how much more than that is needed in space?
Because how many tragedies in the Arctic and Antarctica, in the taiga and in the deserts have occurred simply because of the weight and volume constraints that people have taken with them. And in space, as they say, a man is not living alone in bread. Only exhausting daily physical activities can restore the strength, and strength rapidly weakening the muscles, weightlessness, and bone tissue. As a result of their participation in space flights, medical attention was finally given to a perfectly healthy person. And it turned out that they had so far hardly known his inner reserves, the weakest and most sustainable warrant but had been given. And immediately, the views on the prevention of various diseases, on overloading, and the time does not fly fast. And the 20th anniversary of the Interspace program has seen new participants. Fascinating peace projects. I came into the squad dreaming of a Martian program, but unfortunately, we don't know how to build spaceships so fast. I believe that the future Martian space crew is walking on the ground. Some may have graduated from school, but they are somewhere among us. And I'd very much like to see Mars, his mysterious companion, Phobos, who's long been agitating scientists with his unusual characteristics, will soon be leaving this interplanetary station. There's a lot to learn from it. There's a lot of work behind you. What else can we do to make sure that there's not a single device, a blog, that's millions of miles away? Along with scientists from a number of socialist countries, the experiment involves specialists from Austria, Finland, France, Switzerland, Sweden, and the European Space Agency. We are human beings, and human beings always take what they don't know. He found America, new continents. He started flying into space, and he should be.
It will give us some basis the next Wednesday, and the next buckets of ideas, all the applications that space will give us.
It's not about us. This is already the case for the next generation.
That's why people always start what they don't see.
But his children will see this future. Interspace, those who send out an even more amazing human creation. Even more fantastic. Academic Ilya Frank, one of the patriarchs of Soviet science, advises young scientists. All Soviet Baikonur, Plesetsk, Kapustin Yar launch is ready for a new Commonwealth launch.